I'm Jake, 36, and if you had told me a few years ago that my own brother would treat me and my son like an afterthought, I probably would have laughed it off. We weren't always like this. Growing up, Matt and I were close in that uneven kind of way siblings can be. Him, the confident golden boy who could charm anyone. Me, the quiet one who just wanted peace. He was 2 years older, taller, louder, and our parents adored him for it. I didn't mind, not really. I learned to blend into the background, to find contentment in small things, books, quiet mornings, time with my son. But lately, it felt like Matt had gone from being this show-off big brother to something meaner, sharper. Like every small success I had was a threat to him. I got divorced 3 years ago. My ex-wife and I co-parent our son, Ethan, who's 9 now. He's bright, curious, and way too perceptive for his age. After the divorce, my family, especially Matt, acted polite but distant, like I'd brought some invisible bad luck with me. I tried to stay connected anyway. Family dinners, birthdays, holidays. I'd show up, smile, bring gifts, and pretend not to notice when Matt's wife, Olivia, made her little digs about single dads needing help or how some people can't handle commitment. It was never direct enough to call out, just sharp enough to sting. Last month, Mom decided to celebrate her birthday early with a family lunch. She said it would be nice to keep things simple, so she suggested we all meet at this new Italian restaurant in town. I was honestly looking forward to it. It had been a rough week, and Ethan had been excited about Grandma's special spaghetti day, as he called it. I got us both dressed up a bit, nothing fancy, just jeans and button-downs, and we drove over. When we got there, I noticed Matt and Olivia were already seated with my parents. They were laughing, drinks already half finished. I walked up smiling. "Hey, everyone," I said, putting my hand on Ethan's shoulder. He smiled and waved politely like I'd taught him. Matt barely looked up. "Oh," he said, glancing at Olivia. "You actually came." I said I would. I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Mom smiled nervously, fiddling with her napkin. "We weren't sure, sweetheart. You didn't text this morning." "I didn't think I needed to," I said, still smiling but feeling a little sting of embarrassment. The waiter appeared then, holding menus. "Are we waiting for anyone else?" he asked. Matt looked right at me and said, "No, we're all here." There was a pause. I looked at the 2 empty chairs at the end of the table, then at Ethan, who was quietly holding my hand. "Actually, I think those are for us," I said, half joking. Matt chuckled. "We didn't order for you," he said, as if that made perfect sense. I blinked. "What?" Olivia leaned forward, smiling the kind of smile that hides a sneer. "We thought you might cancel, Jake. You know, like last time. So we just ordered for the table. You can still sit, though. Maybe get something after we finish." Ethan looked up at me, confusion all over his face. "Dad, why didn't they order for us?" he whispered at him. My throat tightened. For a second, I didn't know what to say. I forced a smile, though my chest felt heavy. "It's okay, bud," I said softly. "We'll figure it out." The waiter hesitated, looking between us. "Would you like me to bring another table, sir?" he asked. Matt waved him off. "No need. They can stay if they want to watch." Olivia laughed lightly, touching Matt's arm. "Oh, come on. Don't be so mean. He knows we're joking." But the way she said it, like she was daring me to take it seriously, made it clear she wasn't joking at all. I swallowed hard, keeping my composure. "We'll just grab another table," I said calmly. I turned to the waiter. "If you could get us one nearby, that'd be great." He nodded quickly, sensing the tension, and guided us to a small 2-person table near the corner. It wasn't far, just close enough that we could still see them. Ethan climbed into his chair quietly. He wasn't pouting or whining, which almost made it worse. He was just disappointed that the waiter brought us menus. I tried to lighten the mood. "You want to pick the pasta this time?" I asked him. "You're the expert." He nodded, his voice small. "Can we still see Grandma after?" "Of course," I said, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it. From across the room, I could hear Matt's voice carrying, loud, cheerful, performative. "Olivia, you have to try this wine. It's so smooth." Then, a laugh from my parents, a clink of glasses. It was like we were ghosts in the same room. The waiter came by again to take our order. Before I could say anything, I noticed him glance toward my brother's table. "They said your family?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" He smiled faintly, almost like he knew something I didn't. "Got it," he said. writing something on his pad before walking away that I tried not to think much of it. Maybe he just wanted to double check. Ethan and I talked about school, his art project, the science fair next week. I laughed when he told me about how his class hamster had escaped during math. Slowly, the tension started to fade. Then I noticed the waiter returning with plates. 2 of them. Large, steaming plates of pasta and garlic bread. Exactly what my mom used to order for family dinners. Except they weren't ours. They were theirs. I blinked in confusion as he set them down in front of us. I think you might have mixed up the tables," I said carefully. He smiled politely. "No, sir. This order is for you." I looked up, and across the room, Matt's grin was gone. He was staring, frozen, fork halfway to his mouth. Ethan's eyes widened. "Dad, isn't that Grandma's favorite?" "Yeah," I said slowly, still trying to piece together what was happening. Within minutes, the waiter returned with more dishes, breadsticks, salad, a small dessert platter. All things I hadn't ordered. Meanwhile, my brother's table sat untouched, the family glancing back and forth, whispering that I didn't say a word. I just smiled at the waiter and thanked him. Then I started eating. Slowly, bite by bite. Ethan followed my lead, giggling a little as if it were some secret game between us. Every time I looked up, Matt was glaring. Olivia had stopped smiling. Mom looked uncomfortable. Dad just stared down at his empty plate. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The waiter never went back to their table. When Matt finally waved his hand to get someone's attention, the waiter nodded politely, but didn't come. Instead, he kept checking on us. "Everything good over here?" "Perfect," I said, taking another slow bite. "Really, really perfect." By the 40-minute mark, Matt's patience had evaporated. He started flagging people down, talking louder. Olivia crossed her arms, muttering under her breath. The rest of the restaurant began to notice. And then, just as Ethan finished the last of his dessert, the waiter walked over to Matt's table. He placed a small folded piece of paper in front of my brother and said something softly. Matt's face went red, redder than I'd ever seen. He looked at the bill, then at me, then back at the waiter. Across the room, I could almost see his lips form the words, "Are you kidding me?" The waiter only smiled faintly and replied something I couldn't quite hear, but I caught the last few words as he turned away. "Your order, your bill." I leaned back, quietly wiping my mouth with a napkin, my heart pounding, not with anger, but something closer to satisfaction. I didn't plan any of it. At least, not exactly. But as I stood up to leave, the way Matt's glare followed me, and the way my mom's face shifted from confusion to realization. That's when it started. That was the moment everything changed between us, and I hadn't even done the real part yet. For the next few days after that lunch, things were oddly quiet. No angry texts from Matt. No calls from my parents trying to smooth things over. Just silence. Which, honestly, was fine by me. I wasn't proud of what happened, but I also didn't feel guilty. I didn't plan for the food mix-up, but when it happened, I took it as poetic justice. Maybe, for once, someone else could feel the sting of being treated as less than. Ethan and I spent the rest of that weekend just relaxing. Movies, board games, late pancakes. Every now and then, he'd mention that lunch. "Dad," he said once, "why did Uncle Matt get so mad? You didn't do anything." I sighed, closing the game board. "Some people don't like when things don't go their way," I told him. "But you know what? We just focus on doing the right thing. Let other people deal with their own stuff." He nodded thoughtfully. "So, being kind is still better?" "Always," I said, smiling. "Even if it doesn't feel that way right away." But the truth was, I wasn't sure what being kind meant anymore, not with family like mine. Because beneath the silence, I could feel it. Something was brewing. Sure enough, the storm came a week later. It started with a group text. Mom messaged me, "Matt and Olivia, Sunday dinner at our place. Everyone's welcome. Let's keep it light and happy, okay?" "Sure," I replied, though I hesitated before hitting send. Ethan would be with his mom that weekend, so I figured it might be good to show up alone, keep things calm. Maybe it would be a chance to clear the air. When I arrived, Matt's car was already there, parked right in front like always. I walked in through the back door, the one we used as kids, and found Mom in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She smiled when she saw me. "Jake, I'm glad you came." She hugged me, but her body felt tense. I could tell she was forcing cheerfulness. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "In the living room," she said. "And, Jake, please, just Try to be patient tonight, okay? I frowned. Why? What's going on? Before she could answer, Matt's voice cut through from the next room. Oh look, the guest of honor finally made it. I stepped in to see him lounging on the couch, legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand. Olivia sat next to him, scrolling on her phone, not even pretending to acknowledge me. Dad was in his recliner, watching the muted TV, pretending to be absorbed in the news. Hey, I said quietly, sitting down on the far end of the couch. Matt smirked. So, nice little stunt at the restaurant, he said. I blinked. What stunt? He tilted his head, mock sympathy dripping from his tone. Come on, don't play innocent. You must have said something to that waiter. You think it's funny to embarrass me in front of everyone? I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't say a word, Matt. You're the one who told the waiter we weren't coming. Maybe that's what caused the mix-up. He laughed, sharp and humorless. Right? The mix-up? Sure. Mom stepped in, wiping her hands on a towel. Let's not start this again, she said, glancing between us. It was one meal. Let's move on. But Matt wasn't done. You know what I think, he said. I think you liked it. Sitting there, eating my food, watching me look stupid. That's the only way you ever get attention, huh? Olivia giggled softly, still looking at her phone. It was pretty funny, though. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. Funny, I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. You told me and my son to watch if we were quiet. That was funny to you. Mom's face fell. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say a word. Matt waved a hand dismissively. Oh, come on, Jake. You're too sensitive. It was a joke. We joke all the time. You joke, I said. Everyone else just goes along because you make it miserable if they don't. That got his attention. His smirk vanished. What's that supposed to mean? I looked him straight in the eye. It means you've been treating everyone like they're supposed to revolve around you. You've done it since we were kids. You take credit, you take control, and when someone doesn't play along, you turn it into a scene. Mom tried to interject, but Matt was already on his feet. You think you're better than me? He snapped. I stood up too, keeping my tone even. No, I just think I deserve respect. And so does my son. That name, Ethan, changed something. His expression hardened. Oh, don't start dragging your kid into this. You know, maybe if you'd spent less time playing the victim and more time being a husband, you wouldn't be divorced. The room went dead silent. Mom gasped softly. Dad finally looked up from the TV. Matt. Mom hissed. That's enough. But it was too late. Something in me broke right then, not in the loud, dramatic way he probably wanted. It was quieter, colder, like the last thread finally snapping after years of holding it together. I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I just looked at him and said, You really have no idea how cruel you sound, do you? He scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I turned to Mom. You know what? I'm done. I tried to be part of this family, I really did. But I can't keep showing up to get humiliated and then told it's my fault. I walked toward the door, but then I stopped. Something had been gnawing at me for years, something I'd kept quiet about out of respect, or maybe feared. I turned back. You know, it's funny, I said softly. When Dad helped you get that promotion, I was happy for you. When he co-signed your loan for the house, I didn't say a word. But do you know what Mom told me last year? That you told her I was the reason Dad's been struggling to pay it off. You blamed me. Matt's jaw tightened. That's not. I saw the bank statements, Matt. I interrupted. You missed payments for months. And Dad covered for you. But you blamed me. You told everyone I borrowed money and never paid it back. Mom looked shocked. Is that true? She asked, her voice trembling. Matt didn't answer. He just stared at me with that same calculating look I'd seen before, one that said he was searching for a way to spin it. Olivia finally looked up from her phone. That's not a big deal, she said carelessly. Families help each other. Besides, Jake doesn't need the money. He's single, no mortgage, no real expenses. That's enough, I said sharply. You don't know anything about me. Her smirk didn't fade. You're right. I just know what your brother tells us. That you're, what did he say? Barely holding it together. My hands clenched at my sides. Well, that's interesting, I said, my voice calm but shaking slightly. Because while you've been sitting here pretending everything's perfect, I've been watching Dad quietly stress about the house, Mom stretch her savings, and the two of you flaunt everything like you earned it. So maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's that you can't stand the idea that people see you for what you really are. Matt's face turned red, then pale. You think you know everything, huh? Fine. If you're so sure, maybe you should talk to Dad about that little business loan you got 5 years ago. Or did you forget? Mom looked confused. What loan? My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Matt smirked. Oh, you didn't tell them? That's right. You borrowed from Dad when you were out of work. Thousands, wasn't it? That was a gift, I said, my voice trembling now. Dad offered. I paid him back, every cent. Matt leaned back, savoring it. Sure you did. He was lying. I knew he was lying. But I could see the doubt flicker in my parents' eyes, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money or pride. It was about control. He wanted me small, uncertain, always defending myself. So I smiled, quietly, deliberately. You're right, Matt, I said softly. Maybe we should talk about it. All of it. He looked caught off guard. What? Every lie you've told, every time you've used Dad's name to get ahead, every little secret you've tried to keep under wraps, I said. Let's talk about it. Mom's hand went to her chest. Jake, what are you saying? I looked at her gently. I'm saying I've been quiet long enough. And the way Matt's expression shifted, panic, anger, and that flicker of guilt he couldn't hide, told me I'd finally hit the nerve I'd been aiming for all these years. That dinner ended the same way every confrontation with Matt ever had. Loud voices, half-truths, and my parents begging for peace. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't backing down, because the next day, I found something in my email that changed everything, something that proved, beyond any doubt, what kind of person my brother really was. And that was the moment when it all began to unravel. The email came early on a Monday morning, just as I was packing Ethan's lunch for school. The house was quiet except for the soft buzz of the coffee machine. It was one of those ordinary mornings that feels safe, steady, until the world shifts beneath you. The sender's name caught my eye immediately. Harrison and Wells Financial Services. My father's old accountant. I hadn't heard from them in years, not since before the divorce. The subject line read simply, regarding the matter of outstanding balances. At first, I thought it was spam, but curiosity made me open it. Inside was a scanned statement, and my name was right there, in bold. A supposed loan repayment of $12,000, dated 3 years ago, with a note that said payment pending. My chest went cold that I had repaid that money. Every cent. My dad had given me a short-term loan when I lost my job after the divorce, and I'd paid him back within 6 months. I even had the transfer receipts saved. But the statement suggested otherwise, as if I'd never paid him at all. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. Then I saw something that made my hands shake. Under the contact section, the listed representative for updates on the account wasn't my father. It was Matt. That was when the full picture began to form that he must have used Dad's account access. He'd always handled their paperwork since Dad's arthritis got bad, to make it look like I still owed the money. And maybe, just maybe, he'd been feeding that narrative to my parents all along that IT wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. It was about trust, the one thing I still believed we shared, despite everything that I spent the rest of that day in a fog, moving through work like a ghost. I managed to keep it together for Ethan when he got home, but inside, I was unraveling. It felt like every effort I'd made to rebuild my life, to be the calm one, the reasonable one, had been turned into a weapon against me. That week, I barely slept. My parents stopped answering my calls. When I finally drove over to their house, Mom answered the door looking tired, older somehow. Jake, she said quietly, your father doesn't want to talk right now. Mom, please, I said. There's been a mistake. Matt. She shook her head. I don't know what to believe anymore. Your brother said you promised to pay him back directly when Dad was sick. And now this letter. That's not true, I said quickly. You know I wouldn't do that. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. I thought I did, she said softly, and closed the door. That was my breaking point. Not the humiliation, not the lies, but seeing that look in her eyes. Like I was a stranger that I didn't yell. I didn't try to defend myself anymore. I just drove home in silence, parked in the driveway, and sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel. For the next month, I pulled back from everyone. Family texts went unanswered. Calls ignored. Even Ethan noticed. You're sad again, he said one night, sitting beside me on the couch that I smiled weakly. Just tired, buddy. He frowned. You don't laugh as much anymore. That one hurt. Kids notice everything. Even the things you try to hide. So, I made a quiet promise to myself that night. No more letting them decide how I felt about my life. I couldn't fix what Matt had done, not yet. But I could build something that wasn't tied to him, to the family's approval, to their endless judgment. That I started small. I focused on my job again, a tech support role that wasn't glamorous but stable. I'd been coasting for a while, doing the bare minimum, afraid to stand out. Now, I pushed harder, stayed late, took on side projects, learned new systems. After work, when Ethan was asleep, I started freelancing, web maintenance, small contracts, anything I could get. It felt good to earn without anyone's help, without anyone questioning where the money came from. Slowly, the fog started to lift. 2 months in, I got promoted. It wasn't a big title jump, but it came with a decent raise and more autonomy. My boss, Greg, pulled me aside one day and said, "You've been different lately, Jake. Focused, confident. Keep this up and you'll go far." It was the first time in a long while I'd felt proud of myself, genuinely proud. Around that time, I also started taking Ethan to a community center on weekends. They had this small father-son robotics club, and it became our thing. He loved building, tinkering, figuring out how things fit together. Watching him work, seeing how happy he looked, reminded me that I still had something real, something good. Then came the turning point I didn't see coming. One evening, as I was packing up after the club meeting, a man approached me, early 50s, kind eyes, wearing a company badge. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You're Jake, right? You helped my son fix that coding error last week." I nodded, surprised. "Yeah, that was fun." "I'm Daniel," he said, offering his hand. "I run a small software firm downtown. We've been looking for someone with your kind of patience. Most tech people, they talk in riddles. You make things simple." He handed me his card. "If you ever want to change, give me a call." I tucked it into my wallet, not thinking much of it. Until 2 weeks later, when my current company went through a restructuring and half the department got laid off, including me. For a moment, I felt the old panic rising, that familiar voice in my head saying, "You're back to square one." But this time, instead of spiraling, I called Daniel. He met me the next day, offered me a position on the spot, better pay, flexible hours, remote friendly. He said, "You came recommended by the only person whose opinion I trust, my kid." I started the new job the following week. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life was my own again. No family strings, no guilt, just work I enjoyed, a son who loved spending time with me, and quiet evenings that didn't feel heavy anymore. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth about Matt, the lies, the manipulation, would eventually come to light. I just didn't know when or how. It happened sooner than I expected. One Saturday morning, Ethan and I were at the park when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. I hadn't heard from her in nearly 3 months. My stomach twisted as I answered. "Hi, Mom." "Jake," she said, her voice trembling. "Can you come over? Please. It's about your brother." For a second, I almost said no. But something in her tone made me agree. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt strange, quiet, tense. Dad was sitting at the dining table, a stack of papers spread out in front of him. Mom looked pale. And Matt, he wasn't there. Dad didn't look up when I walked in. "Sit down, Jake," he said quietly. I hesitated. Then Saturday, he pushed a folder toward me. Inside were several financial documents, bank transfers, loan statements, and handwritten notes. My name appeared on a few, but the signatures weren't mine. They were forged. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. Mom spoke first. "Your brother, we found out he's been accessing our accounts for years, transferring money, changing records." She looked at me, guilt all over her face. "Including that loan." "You were right." I didn't know what to say. Relief and heartbreak collided inside me. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. "He told us it was all temporary, that you were helping him. When we found out the truth, he trailed off. We confronted him this morning. He left." I sat there numb. "Left?" "Packed a bag and walked out," Mom said quietly. "Said we'd regret choosing you over him." For a long time, no one said anything. The house felt too still, too full of years we'd never get back. Then Dad looked at me, really looked at me, and said something I hadn't heard since I was a kid. "I'm sorry, son." It was such a simple thing, but it cracked something open inside me. We talked for hours that day. About everything. The years of favoritism, the blind spots, the lies. Mom cried more than once. Dad admitted he'd leaned too heavily on Matt for help managing things. I thought he was doing it out of kindness, he said quietly. Turns out he was keeping us dependent. When I left that evening, Mom hugged me at the door, holding on longer than usual. We're proud of you, Jake, she whispered. You did everything right. Driving home, I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a quiet kind of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I didn't feel vindictive anymore. I didn't even feel angry. Just done. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over, because people like Matt don't just disappear. They circle back when you least expect it. And this time, I had no intention of letting him hurt anyone again. That call came 2 weeks later, just as Ethan and I were setting up his new robotics project. IT was from an unknown number. And when I answered, the voice on the other end said, low and sharp, "You think you've won, don't you?" For a few seconds, I didn't speak. The sound of my brother's voice on the line sent a chill through me, even though I'd been expecting it on some level. His tone was low, almost calm, the kind of calm that always came right before he lashed out. "Matt," I said finally, steadying my voice. "What do you want?" He laughed softly. "Oh, don't act so self-righteous. You think because you tricked Mom and Dad into believing your little sob story, that suddenly makes you the good guy?" "I didn't trick anyone," I said evenly. "They found the documents, Matt. The forgeries. The fake transfers. It's all right there." "Fake," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You don't even know what you're talking about. You've always been so gullible, Jake. Someone shows you a few papers, and you think you've got it all figured out." "I know what I saw," I said. There was silence for a few seconds, then a low, bitter chuckle. "You think this is over? You think you're the hero now?" "Matt, no," he snapped. "You've made me look like a criminal in front of our parents, my wife, everyone. You've ruined my reputation. Do you have any idea how that feels?" I exhaled slowly. "Maybe a little," I said quietly. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke again, his voice colder this time. "You want to play games? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." The line went dead that I stared at my phone, his words replaying in my head. It wasn't an empty threat. Matt didn't do empty. He did deliberate. He did calculated. He did vengeful. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It was just shifting. For the next few days, I stayed alert. I changed my passwords, locked down my bank accounts, even added extra verification to my email. I didn't want to believe he'd stoop that low, but experience had taught me to prepare for anything. Then strange things started happening. First, my boss forwarded me an anonymous email claiming I'd lied on my employment forms about a previous job. It was laughably easy to disprove, but it still caused a few tense conversations with HR. A week later, my freelance clients started getting spam messages from a fake account pretending to be me, offering discounts and personal deals. The kicker came when a neighbor stopped me in the hallway, frowning. "Hey, Jake, is everything all right with your brother? He dropped by looking for you last night. Said he was worried you were unstable." I felt my stomach drop. Matt wasn't trying to hurt me physically. He was trying to unravel me again, one small, careful lie at a time. For a few days, I kept it to myself. I didn't want to involve my parents again, and Ethan didn't need to know any of it. But when I came home one evening to find my mailbox pried open and papers scattered inside, printouts of old social media posts, photos, even my divorce filing, I realized it was time to stop reacting and start acting. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I made a list. It wasn't dramatic, no big revenge plan moment. Just a calm, precise inventory of every lie, every slight, every moment of manipulation Matt had ever pulled that I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of satisfaction. I wanted exposure, clarity, consequences. For years, I'd been on the defensive, always trying to reason with people who saw what they wanted to see. Not anymore. This time, I'd play on his field, quiet, strategic, and thorough. The first thing I did was reach out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Olivia's older sister, Karen. She and Olivia had fallen out years ago, mostly because Karen couldn't stand Matt's attitude. But Karen was sharp. She worked in compliance for a financial firm, and she had a reputation for knowing when someone was lying before they even opened their mouth. When I messaged her explaining everything, she replied within minutes, "I believe you. Meet me tomorrow. I've been waiting for this." We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. Karen was direct, no small talk. "Olivia's been complaining for months," she said, sipping her coffee. About money going missing, Matt being secretive, late nights, weird calls. You're not the only one he's been lying to. I leaned in. You think she'd talk to me? Karen snorted. She hates you, Jake. But she hates being embarrassed more. If she ever figures out that Matt's been using her accounts to cover his own debts, she'll burn him down herself. That piece of information lit a spark in me. Matt had always been sloppy when it came to hiding his ego. If he'd been manipulating his wife the same way he'd manipulated our parents, it was only a matter of time before he slipped. And that's when the opportunity came out a week later. I got a message from Olivia. The irony almost made me laugh. Her tone was clipped, cold, but there was a tremor of something else under it, fear. Karen told me to call you. Don't make me regret it. We met at a small diner off the highway, neutral ground. She showed up in oversized sunglasses and a tense expression. You've got 5 minutes, she said. Fair enough, I said. You already know Matt's been lying to you. You just don't know how deep it goes. She scoffed. You think you know my husband? No, I said calmly. I know his patterns. He takes, he blames, he hides. That's what he did with me. What he did with our parents. And from what Karen told me, he's doing it to you too. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Then why are you here? I asked softly. That hit a nerve. She looked down at her coffee, her hand trembling slightly. I found things, she said after a moment. Transactions. My savings account. Money I never spent. And every time I ask, he tells me I'm misremembering. That I must have used it. Sounds familiar, I said. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. He keeps everything on this, she said quietly. Business expenses, invoices, transfers. He's paranoid, so he backs it all up himself. I took it while he was in the shower. I blinked, stunned. Olivia, that's illegal. She finished for me, giving a tight smile. Maybe, but so is stealing from your wife. I took a breath. What do you want me to do with it? She hesitated. I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. But if he tries to drag me down with him, I want someone else to have proof. When she slid the drive across the table, something shifted. This wasn't just personal anymore. Matt's lies had spread farther than I realized. And now I had the one thing he'd never expected anyone to get. Evidence. After that meeting, I drove home in silence, my mind racing. I plugged the USB into my laptop and started opening the files. They were messy, dozens of spreadsheets, emails, and scanned invoices. But one folder caught my eye. Family. Inside were copies of loan forms, including mine, but also others, under Dad's name, Mom's, even Olivia's. There were altered figures, duplicate entries, forged signatures. It was all there that I sat back, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. I had enough proof to bury him. But I didn't rush. For once, I wanted to do this the right way that I reached out to Daniel, my new boss, who also happened to have a background in cybersecurity. Over lunch, I told him the situation. He didn't ask why I wanted help. He just nodded. You've got a mess, he said. But if this data's legitimate, there are proper channels. You could go to the authorities. Or, if you're smart, you could let him expose himself first. Expose himself how? People like that don't stop, Daniel said. They always think they're smarter than everyone else. Set a trap. Let him walk right into it. That conversation stayed with me. So I started setting the stage, carefully, quietly. I changed nothing outwardly, made no confrontations. Instead, I sent Matt a single message. We need to talk. About the family. I waited. It didn't take long. He replied within the hour. Finally coming to your senses? Meet me Friday. When Friday came, I didn't go alone. Daniel came with me, posing as a consultant. We met Matt at a downtown cafe, one of those sleek places where everyone pretends to be busy on laptops. He was already there, looking surprisingly composed. Jake, he said smoothly. I was beginning to think you'd gone into hiding. I've been busy, I said. Working. He smirked. Doing what? Cleaning up your little reputation. I didn't take the bait. Actually, I wanted to make peace, I said, leaning forward. There's something you should see first, though. Daniel slid a tablet across the table and opened a file, one of the forged documents from Matt's USB. His expression flickered for a second before he regained composure. Where did you get that? He asked tightly. I smiled faintly. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. He leaned back, trying to sound casual. That's not mine. You've been digging in places you shouldn't. Maybe, I said. But it's interesting. The same forged signatures, The same handwriting, the same routing numbers that connect directly to your accounts. Hard to explain all that away. His jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Maybe, I said again, standing up. Or maybe I'm just giving you a chance to come clean before someone else finds out. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, eyes cold, lips pressed tight to "As Daniel," and I walked out. He whispered, "He's rattled." "Good," I said quietly, "because next time he won't see it coming." And that night, when I got home and tucked Ethan into bed, I sat at my desk staring at that USB drive again. For years, Matt had used my silence as his shield. Now, that silence was over, because I wasn't just planning to defend myself anymore, that I was planning to end his game, for good. When I first thought about revenge, it wasn't loud or dramatic. No shouting, no thrown objects. That's what Matt would have wanted, a scene he could spin into victimhood. I wanted quiet, undeniable proof that would make any story he told collapse on its own. Karen helped me pull together the most damning files from Olivia's USB, forged invoices, altered bank transfers, duplicate entries. Daniel ran them through forensic tools. The patterns were precise. Matt hadn't been sloppy. He'd been methodical. Olivia confirmed her own evidence. Late-night transfers, fabricated consulting fees, even emails where Matt coached people on how to disguise payments. With the evidence, we had options. Daniel advised caution. The police needed corroboration, witness statements, bank confirmations, anything tying the forgeries directly to Matt. Karen had contacts who owed her favors. Olivia, slowly realizing how deeply Matt had lied to her, agreed to cooperate. That we started with the police. Detective Ramos listened carefully, took notes, and promised a full investigation. Copies of every file, bank statement, and email went to the department. She emphasized, "Don't talk to him. We'll handle contact." That was harder for my parents than it was for me. Mom wanted to call him, confront him, demand answers. But I understood. This time, the authorities needed to build a frame that couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding. The subpoenas and investigations moved faster than expected. Banks confirmed suspicious transfers. Contractors testified about invoices Matt had fabricated or altered. Each small confirmation made the whole picture harder for him to spin. Meanwhile, I quietly coordinated with Olivia and Karen. Olivia, once hesitant, realized that coming forward was the only way to protect herself. She handed over a USB drive of financial records Matt had meticulously kept. It was everything: invoices, bank statements, emails, including some that implicated him in actions against our parents. That we walked Dad and Mom through the documents first. His face went through disbelief, confusion, grief. Every fake signature, every forged transfer, the emails instructing contractors, the betrayal was undeniable. Mom cried softly. Dad rubbed his forehead, exhaling the years of misplaced trust. "I thought I was helping him," he whispered. I didn't comfort him. I simply let him see the truth, the way it should have been revealed. When the warrants hit, Matt's world began to collapse. Police showed up at his apartment, confiscated laptops, paperwork, and files. The look on his face, a mix of disbelief and fury, was unforgettable. For once, he had no control. That Matt's defense tried to frame it as misunderstandings or sloppy bookkeeping. But the evidence was damning. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement followed. Olivia's testimony was concise, factual, and undeniable. He was sentenced to probation, restitution, and repayment orders, with his access to certain accounts frozen. The fallout extended beyond the courtroom. Dad had to restructure remaining loans. Mom sought counseling to process years of misplaced trust. Olivia filed for separation, reclaimed her finances, and rebuilt her life. The extended family fractured. Some believed Matt had been framed. Others saw the truth. Thanksgiving that year was quiet but honest. We focused on what we had, not the chaos he left behind. For me, life slowly got easier. Daniel promoted me. The role came with responsibility, a higher salary, and autonomy. Ethan and I moved into a slightly larger apartment, which quickly became a workshop for his robotics projects. Our weekends were filled with board games, programming little robots, and quiet dinners. The small, ordinary routines became the anchor I'd been missing for years. One night, after tucking Ethan into bed, I reflected on the long path we'd taken. Matt had thrived on control and manipulation for years, But exposing the truth required patience, allies, and strategy. The old fear I had when he tried to unravel me returned briefly, but it was gone almost as quickly. Now I knew. Endurance, quiet observation, and deliberate action could dismantle even the most meticulous manipulator. Months later, at a small family barbecue Dad organized, intentionally limited to prevent chaos, I watched Ethan run across the yard toward the swing set. Mom caught my eye, tears in hers, mouthing, "I'm sorry." Dad stood straighter than I'd seen in years. For the first time, I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. The conversation centered on family, trust, and moving forward. Matt never contacted me again after the sentencing. A short, frantic voicemail went unanswered. I had no intention of reviving the past. I realized that my revenge wasn't about humiliation or anger. It was about protecting what mattered and allowing the truth to dismantle a web of lies on its own. Driving home that night, Ethan asleep in the back seat, I felt a quiet relief. Not triumph, not vindication, just a long, patient victory. The rebuilding of life that was mine to shape, free from the shadow of someone else's deceit. If there's a single truth I learned through all of it, it's this. You can survive those who try to rewrite your life. You can gather evidence, allies, and patience, and eventually, the truth will set you free. As I watched Ethan sleep under the glow-in-the-dark moon weed stuck above his bed, I whispered to the darkness, not a promise of revenge, but a quiet acknowledgement. We were safe now. And that safety, earned with patience, strategy, and steadfastness, felt like the first real peace I'd known in years.